Good evening, and welcome to History for Your Sleep. You're safe here, and you can let your mind settle for a moment. Take a slow, comfortable breath and allow the day to loosen its weight around you. If these calm journeys bring you peace, you may subscribe whenever it feels right, quietly, naturally, without any hurry at all. Now, a gentle story begins. Tonight, we step into the ancient Maya world, a land of dense forests and open plazas, stone cities rising above the canopy, soft torchlight flickering along carved walls, and quiet footsteps moving through warm tropical air. A place where mornings followed the rhythm of the sun, where nights echoed with insects and distant voices, and where daily life unfolded in small, steady patterns between fields, homes, temples, and courtyards. Let us wander there, slowly, softly, and let the Maya world reveal itself in the calm of the night. The Maya world did not begin with stone temples. It began with air. Warm, heavy, wet. It settled over the land before anything else stirred. Dense forest stretched in every direction, broken only by narrow clearings, thin paths, and the quiet signs of human presence. Life here did not announce itself loudly. It blended in. At dawn, the forest woke first. Insects faded and birds took over. Leaves moved slightly in the early air. Smoke rose low from cooking fires, barely visible through the trees. These were the signals of daily life, repeated so often they became part of the landscape itself. Most Maya did not live in cities. They lived in small communities scattered across the land. Groups of houses stood near fields, near water sources, near paths that led not to marketplaces, but to work. The forest did not surround these settlements. It passed through them. Homes were simple and temporary by design. Wooden frames, packed earth floors, thatched roofs. They offered shelter, not permanence. Houses were repaired, rebuilt, and replaced over generations, often in the same exact spot. Stability came from repetition, not durability. The day began early. Before heat and humidity grew heavy, people moved. Farmers walked toward milpa fields. Children carried water. Fires were tended again. There was no separation between home and labor. Life flowed between them without pause. The land demanded attention. Rain could arrive suddenly, or not at all. Soil needed care. Fields required clearing, burning, planting, and waiting. Farming was not a background activity. It defined time, effort, and survival. Maize shaped everything. It was food. It was ritual. It was responsibility. Preparing it required daily labor. Grinding stones wore down hands and joints over years. Meals were simple, repetitive, essential. Yet even within this routine, uncertainty remained. One failed season could undo everything. Food storage was limited. Droughts happened. Floods happened. The forest could give and take without warning. This pressure never left. Children learned it early. They worked alongside adults, not because of discipline, but necessity. Childhood was not protected from labor. It was integrated into it. The forest was not silent. It moved constantly. Animals passed unseen. Insects filled the air. Sounds carried differently at different times of day. People learned to listen, not for beauty, but for warning. Fear existed alongside familiarity. Snakes, illness, sudden storms, infections from small wounds. Many dangers were invisible until too late. Medicine was limited. Survival depended on endurance more than cure. Religion did not stand apart from this life. It was woven into it.
Small offerings, quiet prayers, acknowledgement of forces beyond control. Gods were not distant figures. They were explanations for rain, growth, failure, and loss. Time itself felt present. Days were not just days, they carried meaning. Calendars influenced decisions, even at the household level. Some moments felt safe, others felt dangerous. This shaped behavior quietly but constantly. At night, the forest changed again. Darkness arrived quickly. Firelight became essential. Sounds intensified. Sleep was light. People stayed close. Children were protected with rituals and amulets. Night was not rest, it was vigilance. And yet life continued, not dramatically, not heroically, but steadily. Most days were not remembered individually. They blurred together, shaped by work, weather, and repetition. This sameness was not failure, it was survival. The Maya world was not fragile because it lacked complexity. It was fragile because it depended on balance, between rain and drought, between effort and exhaustion, between belief and fear. And yet it endured for centuries, not because of rulers or monuments, but because ordinary people adjusted again and again. They rebuilt homes, replanted fields, buried their dead, and returned to work. This was the beginning of Maya life, not stone and ceremony, but forest, labor, breath, and waiting. And this rhythm, quiet, demanding, and persistent, set the tone for everything that followed.
Most Maya did not wake beneath towering temples. They woke beneath trees. Their world was not a continuous city. It was a landscape of small human islands, scattered through forest and field. Houses stood in loose clusters, separated by vegetation, winding paths, and cultivated land. From above, their settlements would have looked quiet, almost incomplete, spaces gently filled by nature. This was intentional. Living close to the land meant living lightly upon it. Forest edges provided materials, shade, and protection. Fields lay nearby. Water sources were within walking distance. Nothing was far, but nothing was dense. Homes gathered around shared courtyards. These open spaces were not decorative, they were functional. Cooking happened here. Repairs happened here. Conversations unfolded during work. Children moved freely between houses, watched by many eyes rather than one. Privacy was limited, life was visible, work was shared, sounds carried easily. This closeness strengthened cooperation, but it also removed distance. Conflict, illness, and hardship were never far from view. The forest blurred boundaries. There were no clear lines between settlement and wilderness. Trees crept close to homes, animals passed nearby, insects entered living spaces freely. Nature did not stay outside. This brought both comfort and risk. The forest provided food, fuel, and materials. It also carried disease, predators, and constant humidity. Mold grew quickly, wounds healed slowly. Rot was a daily concern. Homes were built to adapt, not to last. Materials were local, replaceable. Roofs wore down, walls weakened, floors eroded. Repair was expected, rebuilding was routine. Permanence was not the goal. This made life flexible. If a house failed, it could be rebuilt. If conditions worsened, people could move within familiar territory. Settlements shifted slowly over generations, rather than standing fixed. But flexibility came at a cost. Structures offered limited protection. Storms damaged roofs. Fires spread easily.
One accident could destroy a home. Loss was absorbed into routine, not prevented. Villages lacked central streets. Movement followed paths shaped by use, not design. These paths connected homes to fields, to water, to ritual spaces. They curved naturally, responding to terrain rather than order. Daily movement was repetitive. The same routes were walked again and again. Feet packed earth. Knowledge of place was embodied, not mapped. People knew where they were by memory, not markers. This familiarity created safety. Subtle changes were noticed immediately: a broken branch, an altered sound, an unfamiliar trace. Awareness reduced risk. Strangers were noticed immediately. Yet isolation remained. Villages were close to one another, but travel still required effort. Dense vegetation limited visibility. News moved slowly. Assistance was not immediate. Illness revealed this vulnerability. When disease appeared, care depended on household and community. There were no distant specialists. Healing relied on shared knowledge and belief. If that failed, loss followed. Children grew up surrounded by work. They watched adults repair roofs, prepare food, tend fields. Learning was constant, informal, practical. There were no separate spaces for education. Knowledge lived in movement. Elders anchored memory. They remembered past droughts, past migrations, past recoveries. Their stories shaped decisions: where to build, when to move, what signs to trust. But memory could not control the future. Climate shifted unpredictably. Rain patterns changed. Forests reclaimed abandoned areas quickly. A village that thrived for generations could weaken within decades. Abandoned spaces did not remain empty. Vegetation returned, paths vanished, structures collapsed. The land erased traces of habitation quietly, without violence. This impermanence shaped mindset. People did not assume continuity. They prepared for change. Adaptation mattered more than attachment. Despite this, communities endured because they were built around cooperation, not scale. Shared labor, shared risk, shared survival. The Maya world was not dominated by cities. It was sustained by villages, by people who lived close to soil and trees, whose days were shaped by proximity, not power. Their lives left fewer monuments, but they carried the weight of civilization. This quiet pattern, house, courtyard, path, field, repeated endlessly across the landscape. It was ordinary, and it was enough to support a world. Maya homes were not built to impress. They were built to endure. Heat, rain, insects, time. Most houses followed a simple form: a raised platform, walls of wood or stone, a roof of tightly layered thatch. This design appeared again and again across regions, not because of tradition alone, but because it worked. Elevation mattered. Raising the floor protected against flooding during heavy rains. It reduced moisture rising from the ground. It limited insects and small animals, though never completely. Life remained porous. Inside, space was minimal. There were no separate rooms in the modern sense. Daily activities flowed into one another. Cooking, resting, working, ritual, all shared the same space. Mats replaced beds. Storage was simple, visible. Furniture was rare, not because of poverty, but because flexibility mattered more than objects. Space needed to change with the day. A clear floor allowed work, rest, or gathering as needed. Fire was central. Cooking fires burned daily. Smoke filled the air and escaped slowly through the roof. This reduced insects and preserved the thatch, but it also irritated eyes and lungs. Breathing smoke was normal, not avoidable. Comfort was limited. Houses offered shade, not coolness. Humidity clung to skin. Sweat dried slowly. Walls blocked sun, not heat. Relief came from airflow rather than insulation. Maintenance was constant. Thatch decayed quickly in tropical conditions. Walls weakened. Platforms cracked. Repair was expected, not occasional. A home was never finished. It was managed. This constant work shaped routine. Repair fit between farming, food preparation, and ritual. There was no clear separation between domestic labor and survival labor. They were the same. Homes held meaning beyond shelter. They were tied to ancestors. Rebuilding often occurred on the same foundation, layer upon layer. The ground beneath a house held memory. Living space connected present life to past generations. But memory did not guarantee safety. Storms tore roofs away. Fire spread easily. Accidents happened. Loss could arrive suddenly, undoing years of effort in moments. Recovery was communal. Neighbors helped rebuild. Materials were shared. Labor was exchanged. Support reduced risk, but it also reinforced dependence. Survival was collective. Homes also shaped vulnerability. Crowded living increased disease spread. Smoke exposure weakened lungs. Damp conditions encouraged infection. Comfort was sacrificed for practicality. Privacy was limited. Sound carried. Activity was visible. Personal space was rare. This strengthened bonds, but reduced solitude. Emotional distance was difficult to maintain. Children grew up inside this openness. They learned by watching. There were no barriers between adult work and childhood observation. Tools, fire, risk, all were part of learning. At night, the house changed again. Darkness arrived quickly. Firelight flickered across walls. Outside sounds intensified. Insects entered freely. Sleep was light, alert. Protection relied on ritual and proximity. Amulets were placed, prayers spoken. Families slept close. The house became a shared shield against the unseen. Despite hardship, homes offered stability. They anchored daily rhythm. Even when crops failed or climate shifted, the familiar structure provided orientation, a place to return to. This stability was fragile. Houses could not withstand prolonged crisis. Drought, famine, conflict. Movement followed. When people left, homes decayed quickly. The forest did not wait. Abandoned houses disappeared within years. Thatch collapsed. Wood rotted. Stone remained briefly, then sank into soil and vegetation. Impermanence was understood. People did not expect homes to last forever. They expected them to serve for a time. This shaped values: repair over preservation, function over display. The simplicity of Maya homes was not a lack, it was adaptation, a response to environment, resources, and uncertainty. These structures allowed people to live with constant pressure rather than against it. Homes did not protect people from all danger, but they gave just enough shelter to continue. And that was enough.
Food in the Maya world was never guaranteed. Every meal depended on rain, soil, timing, and endurance. Behind the calm image of maize fields and shared cooking fires stood constant uncertainty. The food that sustained an entire civilization was simple, repetitive, and fragile. Maize was everything.
not just a crop, but a foundation of life. Fields of maize shaped calendars, rituals, and daily schedules. Time was measured through planting and harvest more than through years. But maize did not grow on hope alone. It demanded labor before dawn, attention throughout the season, patience afterward. Fields had to be cleared, burned, planted, watched, and protected. A single mistake could cost a family its main source of food. Preparation mattered as much as growth. Maize kernels were treated with lime in a process now called nixtamalization. This step was essential. Without it, the grain could not fully nourish the body. The Maya did not know the chemistry, but they knew the result. Untreated maize weakened people. Grinding was daily labor. Every morning, maize was crushed on stone metates. This work fell largely on women. It was physically demanding. Knees pressed against stone, arms repeated the same motion for hours. Over time, joints wore down. Pain became familiar. The sound of grinding was constant. It filled the morning, part of the landscape like birds or insects. The day began with that rhythm. Meals were modest: tortillas, porridge, beans, squash. Meat was rare, usually reserved for special occasions. Protein came from fish, insects, and small animals. Diet was balanced when harvests were good, brutally limited when they were not. Storage was minimal. Most food was consumed soon after harvest. Long-term reserves were difficult to maintain in humid conditions. Mold, insects, rot, constant threats. Families lived close to the edge of sufficiency. This made drought terrifying. One bad rainy season could collapse food security. Two could break an entire community. Hunger was not sudden. It crept in quietly. Portions grew smaller. Bodies weakened. Work slowed. Children suffered first. Their bones show signs of malnutrition. Growth slowed. Illness became deadlier. Hunger was shared, but its impact was uneven. Food was never wasted. Scraps were reused, portions measured carefully. Sharing inside the family was expected. Sharing beyond it was harder during scarcity. Communal meals mattered. Eating together reinforced bonds. It reminded people that survival was collective. Food was not only nourishment, it was social glue. But even community had limits. When supplies ran low, tension grew. Families protected their own. Generosity became risky. Moral choices turned into survival calculations. Spice mattered. Chili peppers were common, not only for flavor but for preservation and stimulation. They masked spoilage. They made simple meals tolerable. Alcohol was rare. Fermented drinks existed, but consumption was limited, often ritual. Daily drunkenness would have been disastrous in a world that demanded constant alertness. Cooking spaces were open. Smoke drifted through homes. Eyes stung. Lungs absorbed soot. This was the price of warmth and prepared food. Eating was routine, not indulgence. There were no elaborate dishes for most people. Repetition ruled. Variety depended on environment and luck. Yet food carried meaning. Maize was sacred. It connected humans to gods. Eating was not separate from belief. Each meal reinforced the idea that life continued, at least for another day. That belief mattered when reality pressed hard. In years of abundance, meals brought comfort. In years of hunger, they brought anxiety. Food was both reassurance and reminder of vulnerability. The Maya did not starve constantly, but they lived knowing hunger was always possible. That awareness shaped discipline, restraint, respect for routine. People did not eat casually. They ate carefully. Civilizations are often measured by monuments, but the Maya world was sustained by hands grinding grain at dawn, by families dividing small portions fairly, by fields watched under uncertain skies. Stone temples may endure, but maize sustained life, and life was never guaranteed.
Farming in the Maya world was never routine in the modern sense. From the outside, it looked repetitive, the same movements, the same fields, the same seasons. But beneath that repetition lived constant uncertainty. Every season carried risk. Every field depended on forces no one could fully control. The land was not permanently owned. Fields were cleared from forest using slash-and-burn methods known today as milpa. Trees were cut, vegetation dried, fire prepared the soil. For a few years, the land produced food. Then it was left to recover, and the cycle moved elsewhere. This system worked until it didn't. It required balance. Too much clearing weakened the soil. Too little reduced yield. Timing mattered. Rain mattered more. Rain was everything. There were no rivers running through most Maya lowlands. Agriculture relied on seasonal rainfall. When the rains arrived on time, fields turned green quickly. When they did not, anxiety spread faster than crops. Farmers watched the sky constantly. Cloud patterns were read, winds were noted. Rituals accompanied planting, not out of superstition alone, but because nothing else offered control. Prayer filled the gap where certainty ended. Work began early. Before heat built up, families walked to the fields. Men, women, and children worked together. Tools were simple: stone blades, wooden digging sticks. Progress was slow, physical. The labor never truly stopped. Weeding, guarding crops from animals, repairing boundaries. Fields demanded attention long after planting. Neglect showed quickly. Animals were a threat: birds, rodents, insects. Losses were expected. Complete protection was impossible. Farmers accepted partial loss as normal. Harvest brought relief, not celebration. It was careful work. Crops were gathered quickly to avoid spoilage or theft. Storage followed immediately, though options were limited. Then came waiting again. Fields rested. Families waited for the next cycle. In good years, this waiting was calm. In bad years, it was heavy with fear. Drought was the worst enemy. A single dry season could weaken a village. Extended droughts triggered migration, conflict, or collapse. Archaeological evidence shows entire regions abandoned when farming failed. These were not sudden decisions. People held on as long as possible. They reduced food intake. They borrowed. They relied on ritual and hope. Leaving meant losing land, ancestors, identity. Farming shaped bodies. Repetitive labor marked joints and spines. Arthritis appears even in young remains. The land asked for strength early and took it permanently. Children learned farming before choice existed. They followed adults into fields. Tasks were adjusted to size, not age. Learning was constant, practical. School was the field. Failure was personal. When crops failed, responsibility felt individual, even when causes were environmental. Shame and anxiety followed poor harvests. Community softened the impact. Shared labor and redistribution helped some survive bad years. But resources were limited. When many failed at once, support collapsed. Farming was not romantic. It was discipline, endurance, calculation.
knowing when to plant, when to wait, when to move on. Belief supported endurance. Gods of rain and maize were not distant, they were part of daily work. Offerings were not dramatic gestures, they were requests for balance. Success reinforced belief, failure deepened fear. The field was where cosmology met reality, where humans negotiated with nature without leverage. Despite this, farming sustained centuries of life, not because it was easy, but because it was adaptable. Milpa allowed recovery. Knowledge accumulated slowly. Communities adjusted. But margins were thin. There was little buffer between survival and loss. Every season mattered. The Maya farmer lived inside cycles: day cycles, rain cycles, growth cycles, collapse cycles. There was no illusion of control, only participation. And each morning people returned to the fields, not because they were certain of reward, but because there was no other way forward. That quiet persistence fed cities, supported elites, kept families alive. Farming was not background, it was daily uncertainty made livable through routine. In the Maya world, the body was shaped long before it was understood. There was no separation between daily labor and physical form. Work did not simply use the body, it slowly remade it, year after year, until effort became visible in bone, in muscle, in posture. Labor began early in life. Children did not wait to grow strong before working. Strength was built through repetition, carrying water, gathering wood, walking long distances, helping in fields. These tasks came naturally, not because they were easy, but because there was no alternative. The body adapted. Feet hardened from walking barefoot. Skin thickened under sun and humidity. Movements became efficient, economical, practiced. Energy was conserved instinctively, but adaptation had limits. Stone tools demanded force. Grinding maize on metates required hours of pressure every day. Knees pressed into stone. Wrists repeated the same arc thousands of times. Over time, joints wore down. Arthritis appears early in skeletal remains. This is not an exception, it is common. Bodies aged faster under constant strain. Pain did not signal injury, it signaled normal life. Women carried a heavy share of this burden, grinding grain, hauling water, preparing food, weaving fibers. These tasks left marks on shoulders, spines, and hands. Strength was quiet, expected. Men's bodies bore different strain, clearing forest, farming, transporting materials, constructing buildings. All demanded endurance rather than short bursts of force. Muscles developed for persistence, not display. Rest existed, but it was brief. Shade provided relief, not recovery. There was no extended rest from work. Even illness reduced labor only temporarily. Survival required return. Injury was dangerous. Without modern medicine, minor wounds could become fatal. Infection spread quickly in humid environments. Healing depended on rest, herbs, and chance. Bodies carried scars, not as symbols of conflict, but of work. Cuts, burns, joint damage. These were markers of experience. The body recorded life more reliably than memory. Pain was normalized. It was not dramatized, not treated as exceptional. People lived with discomfort and learned to function through it. Complaints did not change necessity. This shaped psychology. Endurance was valued more than strength, patience more than speed. The ability to continue mattered more than the ability to excel. Bodies were communal resources. When someone weakened, others compensated. Tasks were redistributed. No one worked alone for long. Cooperation reduced individual collapse. Yet this support had limits. If too many bodies failed at once, through illness, drought, or famine, the system strained. Collective endurance depended on collective health. Bodies reflected social roles. Elites worked less physically, but they were not free from bodily risk. Ritual bloodletting, fasting, ceremonial strain. The body still paid a price. Beauty was not separate from function. Strength, posture, resilience, these were admired. A capable body was a respected body. Physical ability had social meaning. There was no expectation of comfort. The goal was continuation, to wake, work, eat, sleep, again. Pleasure existed, but it did not organize life. Aging was gradual and visible. People aged into limitation rather than retirement. Work changed form, not presence. Elders advised, supervised, performed lighter tasks. Death often followed exhaustion, not suddenly, but after years of cumulative strain. Bodies simply wore out. This was understood. Life was not measured by years lived, but by years contributed. A body's value lay in participation. Despite this, people did not live in misery. They lived with familiarity. Pain was known. Strength was built around it. The body was trusted, even when it failed. Work gave rhythm. Movement structured the day. Repetition provided predictability. The body learned what came next. In a world shaped by uncertainty, weather, crops, disease, the body became one of the few reliable constants. It woke when needed. It worked until required. It rested when allowed. This quiet physical discipline supported everything else: farming, craft, family, belief. Stone cities rose not from ambition alone, but from bodies that endured long enough to build them. The Maya world was carried, literally, by human bodies shaped through work, and those bodies kept moving.
In the Maya world, family was not a background structure. It was the system that held daily life together. Survival, learning, identity, all passed through family bonds long before any wider social order mattered. Most people lived close to relatives. Homes were grouped. Courtyards connected households. Several generations often shared the same space, or lived only steps apart. Daily life unfolded in view of others, rarely alone. Privacy was limited, but protection was strong. Family meant shared labor, food preparation, farming, repairs, childcare. Tasks were distributed naturally, without formal planning. Everyone knew what was expected. Children entered this system early. There was no clear boundary between childhood and adulthood. As soon as a child could walk steadily, they observed. Soon after, they helped. Learning was not explained. It was absorbed. Children watched hands grind maize, weave fibers, sharpen tools. They repeated movements until they worked. Mistakes were corrected through example, not instruction. Play mirrored work. Games copied adult tasks, carrying small loads, pretending to farm, imitating rituals. This was preparation, not entertainment. Childhood was short, not because it was cruel, but because survival required contribution. Waiting served no purpose. Skills mattered more than age. Education was practical. Knowledge passed through repetition. There were no abstract lessons for most people. Understanding came from doing the same task every day. Family roles were clear, but flexible. Men worked, women worked, children worked.
Tasks differed. Value did not. Contribution defined worth more than position. Elders held authority, not through force, but through experience. They remembered seasons, failures, recoveries. Their guidance mattered most when uncertainty returned. Memory was a resource. Families carried knowledge of past droughts, past storms, past migrations. These stories guided decisions. Survival depended on remembering what had already gone wrong once. But family life was fragile. Disease moved easily through close living. Infection spread quickly. When one person weakened, others absorbed the work. Loss was common. Children died young. Women died in childbirth. Elders died from exhaustion. Grief was frequent, but life did not pause. Families adapted. Children were raised by relatives. Widows remained within the household network. Orphans depended on community ties. This resilience was necessary. Without it, daily life would collapse under loss. But resilience came with pressure. Expectations were constant. There was little room to fail quietly. Everyone was visible. Everyone mattered. Conflict existed. Disagreements happened. Tension grew during scarcity. Food shortages tested relationships. But breaking family bonds was dangerous. Isolation meant vulnerability. Families also carried belief. Rituals happened at home. Offerings were made near hearths. Ancestors were honored inside living space. The household was sacred. This closeness between belief and daily life shaped identity. A person was not an individual first. They were part of a family, tied to land, to ancestors, to shared responsibility. Children learned fear as well as skill. They learned which nights were dangerous, which places were avoided, which days were unlucky according to the calendar. Awareness came early. Night amplified vulnerability. Families slept close together. Fires stayed lit. Sounds from the forest reached every ear. Children learned to trust the group, not themselves. Despite hardship, affection existed. Care was shown through food sharing, through teaching, through presence. Love was practical. It appeared in effort, not words. Joy was quiet. A good harvest, a healthy child, a repaired roof. These moments mattered deeply, but joy was never guaranteed. Families lived knowing loss could return. This knowledge did not paralyze them. It disciplined them. Routine provided stability. The same tasks, the same paths, the same meals. Repetition reduced fear. Family life was not idealized. It was demanding, intimate, unavoidable. But it worked. Through families, knowledge survived. Through families, labor continued. Through families, children learned how to live inside uncertainty. The Maya world endured, not because of kings or monuments, but because families kept functioning even when conditions were harsh. That quiet persistence was learned early and carried for life. Craft in the Maya world was not separate from daily life. It did not happen in distant workshops. It did not belong to a small group of specialists. It happened inside homes, in courtyards, in shaded spaces between other tasks. Craft was not an occupation for most people. It was a necessity folded into routine. Everything was made by hand: tools, containers, clothing, rope, baskets, stone blades. Nothing arrived finished. Every object passed through human effort before it could be used. This made skill essential. A poorly made tool wasted energy. A weak basket failed under load. A cracked pot meant lost food. Craft quality directly affected survival. Learning began early. Children watched hands shape clay, twist fibers, sharpen stone. They learned which materials cracked, which bent, which held. There were no manuals, only repetition. Mistakes were costly. Clay vessels shattered during firing. Obsidian cut skin easily. Woven fibers frayed under strain. Failure meant starting again with limited resources. Pottery was everywhere: cooking pots, storage jars, water vessels. Every household relied on them. Clay was shaped slowly, dried carefully, fired with attention. Timing mattered. Rain could ruin everything. Pottery production was patient work. Drying took days. Firing required fuel and watchfulness. Too much heat cracked vessels. Too little weakened them. Success depended on experience, not speed. Textiles were equally vital. Clothing protected against sun, against insects, against abrasion. Fibers came from cotton or agave. Spinning and weaving were slow, repetitive tasks, often done in shade. Threads broke often. Repair was constant. Clothing was patched again and again. Replacement took time and labor. Stone tools demanded precision. Obsidian blades were sharp but fragile. Edges dulled. Handles loosened. Tools required frequent maintenance. A neglected blade was dangerous. Hands carried scars, cuts from stone, burns from firing, abrasions from fibers. These marks were common, not exceptional. Craft shaped posture. Weaving bent the spine forward. Grinding leaned weight into arms. Shaping stone demanded steady wrists. Bodies adapted around tasks. There was no concept of mass production. Each object carried variation. Uniformity was unnecessary. Function mattered more than appearance. Decoration existed, but it was restrained. Patterns carried meaning. Colors indicated identity or belief. But excess was rare. Time and resources limited embellishment. Craft time competed with survival tasks. Farming came first. Food preparation followed. Craft filled gaps between essential labor. This made efficiency crucial. Darkness ended work. Without artificial light beyond fire, fine tasks stopped. Errors increased in low light. Rest became necessary. Craft knowledge stayed within families. Skills passed from parent to child. Outsourcing was rare. Trust mattered. Sharing techniques outside the household happened slowly. Trade expanded craft reach. Some items moved between communities: pottery, tools, textiles. Exchange allowed limited specialization, but most people still produced what they used. Failure had consequences. A broken water vessel meant thirst. A torn basket spilled grain. Craft errors rippled outward. This pressure sharpened attention. People worked carefully, not quickly. Slowness reduced waste. Patience saved effort. Craft was quiet. No loud machinery, no constant noise. Only rhythmic motions: scraping stone, twisting fiber, tapping clay. These sounds blended into daily life. Craft offered moments of control. In a world ruled by rain and chance, shaping material gave satisfaction. Hands could succeed even when crops failed. But craft could not solve everything. It eased daily life. It did not remove vulnerability. Tools broke, materials ran out. Injury ended ability. Craft depended on healthy bodies. When illness struck, production slowed. Household balance shifted. Others absorbed the work. Despite this, craft persisted. Day after day, generation after generation. Skills accumulated quietly. Civilization rested on this labor. Temples required tools. Agriculture required containers. Ritual required crafted objects. None appeared without patient hands. Craft did not bring fame. It brought continuity. The Maya world was filled not with masterpieces, but with functional objects shaped through repeated effort. These objects carried fingerprints, habits, small decisions. They made daily life possible. And when abandoned, they were the first to disappear: broken, buried, reclaimed by soil. What remained was not the craft itself, but the evidence that ordinary people once shaped their world slowly, carefully, and without recognition. In the Maya world, belief did not begin in temples. It began at home. Religion was not something visited occasionally. It lived inside daily routine, woven quietly into ordinary actions. Long before priests or ceremonies, belief shaped how people woke, how they worked, how they ate, and how they rested. Every household held sacred space, not separate rooms, not grand altars, but small areas near hearths or walls. Simple offerings, food, objects used every day. These were not symbols for outsiders, they were reminders for the family itself. Belief was practical. Gods were not distant figures, they were forces tied to rain, to maize, to illness, to fertility, to time. When crops failed or sickness appeared, belief explained why order had broken. This made ritual necessary. Small actions, repeated daily. A gesture before work, a quiet offering before planting, a spoken phrase before sleep. These acts were not dramatic, they were habits. Children learned belief early. They watched adults pause before certain tasks. They learned which days were dangerous, which moments required caution. Belief was absorbed, not taught. Homes carried spiritual responsibility. If illness entered a household, it was not random. Something had shifted. Balance had been disturbed. Families searched for causes in behavior, in timing, in forgotten rituals. Fear lived close to belief, not fear of punishment alone, but fear of imbalance. The world felt alive, reactive. Mistakes mattered. This pressure shaped behavior. People avoided certain actions on unlucky days. They delayed travel. They postponed work. Calendars guided decisions beyond practicality. Time was moral. Days carried character. Some were favorable, others were risky. This affected confidence. Anxiety rose when action could not be avoided. Belief offered explanation when control failed. Drought, disease, death. Events without visible cause found meaning through cosmology. This did not solve problems, but it made them bearable. Homes were places of protection. Amulets were placed near sleeping areas. Objects were arranged carefully. Firelight served not only warmth, but safety against unseen forces. Night intensified belief. Darkness reduced visibility. Forest sounds grew louder. Without light, imagination filled space. The unseen felt close. Families responded collectively. Prayers were shared. Silence was respected. Children slept near adults. The home became a defensive circle. But belief also carried burden. Responsibility was internalized. If disaster struck, families questioned their own actions. Guilt could accompany loss. There was little separation between moral failure and misfortune. This made life emotionally demanding. People carried constant awareness that behavior mattered, beyond immediate consequences. Yet belief also stabilized life. Routine rituals provided structure. They marked transitions. They reminded people that the world followed patterns, even when harsh. Belief encouraged patience. Cycles mattered more than moments. Failure today did not end everything. Balance could be restored. This perspective allowed endurance. Even during famine or illness, belief offered continuity. Life felt connected to something larger than individual struggle. Temples amplified what homes practiced quietly. Large ceremonies echoed domestic rituals. Public belief grew from private habit. But most belief never reached monuments. It stayed close to hearths, to fields, to sleeping mats. It shaped how families interpreted everyday events. Belief was not escapism. It was a framework for living inside uncertainty. It told people when to act, when to wait, when to endure. In a world without scientific explanation, Belief offered coherence, but it came at a cost. Fear never fully disappeared. The sense of being watched by gods, by ancestors, by unseen forces remained. People lived carefully. They did not rush decisions. They avoided excess. They respected routine. This carefulness slowed life. It also preserved it. Belief inside the home was quiet, repetitive, powerful. It did not promise safety, it promised meaning. And for the Maya, meaning was necessary to continue.
In the Maya world, time was not something people measured. It was something they lived inside. Days were not empty units moving forward. Each day carried character, weight, consequence. Time was active. It watched, it judged, it responded. Calendars shaped behavior. The Maya tracked time through multiple systems, each serving a different purpose. One marked ritual cycles, another followed the solar year. Together, they guided decisions, large and small. This was not abstract knowledge. Calendars influenced when to plant, when to travel, when to marry, when to rest. Certain days encouraged action, others warned against it. People checked time before acting, not out of superstition alone, but because experience taught caution. Bad timing often preceded failure. Good timing increased confidence. Time carried personality. Some days were considered heavy, others light. Some were dangerous. This emotional quality affected how people moved through the day. An unfavorable day increased anxiety. Work continued, but with restraint. Risky tasks were delayed if possible. Families moved more carefully, aware that the day itself felt unstable. This awareness shaped psychology. Life was lived with constant attentiveness. People watched not only the sky and fields, but the calendar itself. Time was cyclical. Events returned. Seasons repeated. Failures echoed earlier failures. Success followed familiar patterns. This reduced panic. It increased patience. But cycles could also trap. If time turned against a community through drought or repeated loss, hope weakened. People waited for cycles to shift back in their favor. Time influenced responsibility. If misfortune struck on an unlucky day, it felt expected. If it struck on a favorable one, confusion followed. People searched for hidden causes. This reinforced belief. Time was not neutral, it was moral. Living correctly meant aligning with it. Children learned this early. They absorbed which days mattered, which dates carried stories. Time education was part of growing up. Memory was structured through time. Events were remembered by their place in the calendar, not by numerical age. Time anchored memory. Night reinforced time's presence. Darkness marked transition. Firelight replaced sunlight. Activities slowed. The day released its hold. At night, time felt heavier. Fear increased. Silence expanded. The unseen felt closer. People became more aware of cycles beyond control. Time also limited ambition. Long-term planning was cautious. The future depended on cycles, not intention. People prepared for uncertainty rather than dominance. This made life patient. Waiting was normal. Delays were accepted. Rushing rarely paid off. Time governed community events. Rituals aligned villages. Shared dates synchronized behavior. This reduced conflict. It created cohesion. But time could also isolate. If one household fell out of rhythm through illness or loss, it struggled to rejoin the cycle. Time did not pause for individuals. This added pressure. People felt responsible not only to family, but to the calendar itself. Time shaped leadership. Elites used calendars to legitimize authority, but ordinary people experienced time more directly, through hunger, through rain, through fatigue. Time was not an idea, it was felt in the body. Long days of work, short nights of sleep,
seasons that arrived too early or too late. When drought disrupted time, fear deepened, ritual increased, offerings multiplied. People tried to repair the rhythm. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it did not. Time's indifference was understood. Cycles did not guarantee mercy, they only guaranteed movement. This awareness encouraged humility. People did not expect permanence, they expected repetition. The forest would return, fields would fade, homes would be rebuilt, time would continue. This acceptance shaped endurance. The Maya world was not driven by urgency, it was governed by alignment. Living well meant moving in step with time, rather than against it. Even loss found place inside the cycle. Death was not final rupture, it was transition. Memory re-entered time through ritual and story. This softened grief. Life remained hard, but it remained coherent. Time gave structure when certainty was impossible. It watched over life, not as protector, but as a framework. And within that framework, people learned how to continue.
In the Maya world, water was never ordinary. It was life itself, unnoticed when present, devastating when absent. Every routine, every plan, every hope rested quietly on one assumption, that rain would come. And when it did not, fear settled in slowly. Most Maya regions lacked rivers. There were no steady streams to rely on. Instead, people depended on rainfall, seasonal pools, reservoirs, and cenotes, deep natural sinkholes holding water underground. These sources shaped where people lived and how long they could stay. Water dictated settlement. Villages formed near dependable sources. Paths followed water access. Entire regions thrived or emptied based on the reliability of rain. Daily life revolved around carrying water. Children and adults walked long distances with heavy containers. This task repeated endlessly. Missed trips meant thirst. Spilled water meant wasted effort. Water was precious. It was used carefully. Drinking, cooking, washing. Each activity was measured. Waste was dangerous. During dry seasons, tension rose. Reservoir levels dropped. Cenotes became crowded. Disputes emerged quietly, often without violence, but with unease. Access mattered. Rain brought relief. The first storms transformed the landscape. Dust settled, fields darkened, smells changed. Life seemed to breathe again. But rain also brought danger. Too much rain flooded fields, destroyed crops, spread disease. Standing water increased insects. Illness followed moisture as closely as drought followed dryness. Balance was everything, and balance was fragile. The Maya understood this deeply. Rain gods were central figures. Rituals surrounding rain were frequent, careful, urgent. Not grand spectacles every day, but they intensified when fear grew. People watched the sky obsessively. Clouds were read for meaning. Winds were interpreted. Silence from the heavens felt ominous. Drought created psychological strain. Hunger came slowly, but anxiety arrived early. Reduced harvests meant rationing. Families adjusted quietly, hoping conditions would improve before desperation arrived. Water scarcity reshaped behavior. Travel reduced, ritual increased, cooperation tightened. People stayed close to known sources. Cenotes carried dual meaning. They provided water, but also symbolized danger. Depth was unknown. Darkness hid risk. Some cenotes were sacred, feared, avoided. Children learned caution early. Water was not a place to play freely. It demanded respect. Accidents were fatal. Water quality varied. Stagnant reservoirs carried disease. People did not understand bacteria, but they recognized patterns. Illness followed certain sources.
This made water selection cautious. Households favored familiar places. Changes were risky. Trust built slowly. In extreme drought, communities fractured. Migration began. Some left in search of water. Others stayed, hoping cycles would return. These decisions carried enormous weight. Leaving meant abandoning ancestors, homes, identity. Staying meant risking starvation. Water scarcity was never abstract. It shaped politics, belief, survival. Entire cities rose or fell based on water management. Reservoirs required maintenance. Walls cracked, sediment accumulated. Neglect reduced capacity. Water systems demanded constant labor. When systems failed, blame followed. Leaders were questioned, ritual practices intensified. Fear looked for explanation. Water shortages also exposed inequality. Elites accessed better sources. Commoners waited longer. Stress concentrated at the margins. But crisis also fostered solidarity. People shared information. They coordinated usage. Survival depended on collective discipline. At night, water fear deepened. Darkness amplified uncertainty. Sounds near reservoirs caused alarm. People guarded sources quietly. Dreams reflected anxiety. Drought appeared in visions. Rain in prayers. Sleep carried fear forward. When rain finally came, relief was emotional, not just physical. It restored trust in cycles. It reassured belief. It softened fear. But memory lingered. People did not forget drought easily. Past scarcity shaped future caution. Water taught humility. It could not be commanded. It arrived when it chose. Humans adapted or suffered. This reality shaped the Maya worldview. People did not see themselves as masters of nature. They saw themselves as participants in fragile balance. Water defined that balance more than anything else. It fed maize. It filled bodies. It shaped settlement. And it carried constant threat. Daily life moved quietly beneath this awareness. Every cup drawn, every cloud watched, every prayer whispered. Water was not background. It was the question behind every day.
Health in the Maya world was never secure. People lived close to illness, injury, and death, not because they were careless, but because the environment offered little protection. Without modern medicine, survival depended on resilience, observation, and belief. Most sickness began quietly. A fever, a wound that did not close, a cough that lingered too long. Symptoms were noticed early. Understanding their cause was limited. People recognized patterns, not mechanisms. Infections were dangerous. A small cut could become fatal. Humidity slowed healing. Dirt entered wounds easily. Without antibiotics, the body fought alone. Herbal knowledge existed. Plants were used for pain, for inflammation, for infection. Some treatments helped, others did little. Success varied by experience and chance. Healers combined practice with ritual. Medicine and belief were not separate. Illness was often seen as imbalance between body, spirit, time, or behavior. Treatment addressed all at once. This gave comfort. Even when recovery failed, meaning softened fear. People felt illness was understood, even if it could not be cured. Pain was constant. Dental wear from stone-ground maize exposed nerves. Arthritis limited movement. Back pain followed years of labor. These conditions did not end work. They became part of it. Children were vulnerable. Diarrhea, fever, infection. Illness killed quickly. Many did not survive early years. Families expected loss, even while hoping for survival. Pregnancy was dangerous. Women faced high risk during childbirth. Complications were common. Death during labor affected entire households. Medical intervention was limited. Midwives relied on experience.
Outcomes depended on body strength and luck. When women died, families adapted quickly, out of necessity. Disease spread easily. Close living conditions increased transmission. Smoke weakened lungs. Insects carried illness. Clean water was not guaranteed. Isolation was rare. The sick remained near family. Care was given at home. Separation happened only in severe cases, often when fear outweighed hope. Recovery required rest, but rest competed with survival. When labor was essential, the sick returned to work early. This prolonged illness or worsened outcomes. Bodies carried history. Skeletal evidence shows healed fractures, long-term disease, chronic stress. Many survived illness, at a cost. Pain tolerance was learned. Discomfort did not signal emergency. Only inability to function demanded response. This recalibrated perception. Health was communal. When one person weakened, others compensated. Food was shared. Tasks shifted. This support prevented collapse until too many fell ill. Epidemics overwhelmed systems. When disease affected many at once, care failed. Labor stopped. Food production dropped. Mortality increased. Fear followed illness. Not only fear of death, but fear of cause. People searched for explanation. Had a ritual been missed? A calendar ignored? This added psychological burden. Illness was not random. It felt personal. Yet belief also helped endurance. Suffering fit into a larger order. Death did not end meaning. Ancestors remained present. Loss was integrated into life. Healing was slow. Recovery took time. Scars remained. Strength returned gradually. Bodies adapted again. Those who survived became cautious. They remembered vulnerability. They adjusted behavior. They respected limits more closely. Old age was rare, but respected. Those who lived long carried visible wear. Their survival signaled knowledge and restraint. They advised others. Medicine was imperfect, but observation was sharp. People learned what worked, often enough. Knowledge accumulated slowly. Health depended on balance, between labor and rest, between ritual and action, between caution and necessity. There was no illusion of safety. Every day carried risk. Survival was provisional. Yet people lived fully. They worked. They cared. They planned. They hoped. Health without medicine required acceptance. Bodies failed. People adapted. Life continued. Not because illness was defeated, but because it was expected. This expectation did not weaken people. It strengthened patience. And patience kept life moving forward.
Violence in the Maya world was not constant, but it was never far away. For most people, daily life was agricultural, domestic, repetitive. Fields, homes, routine. Yet at the edges of that routine existed threat. Quiet, unpredictable, and capable of reshaping everything overnight. Conflict did not dominate every day. Many communities experienced long periods without war. People preferred stability. Farming, family, and ritual required peace to function. But peace was fragile. Competition over land, over water, over labor, over political loyalty. When balance broke, violence followed. Wars were not abstract events. They disrupted planting schedules. They removed men from fields. They created fear that lingered long after fighting ended. Ordinary people paid the highest price. Battles were decided by elites, but consequences fell on farmers, families, children. Crops were abandoned, homes were damaged, food shortages followed conflict quickly. Captives mattered. War often aimed not at territory, but at people. Prisoners were taken alive. They were symbols of victory, of labor, of ritual value. Being captured was worse than dying. Captives lost identity. They were removed from family, from land.
Survival did not mean freedom. Ritual violence existed. Human sacrifice was real, though not constant. It appeared during important moments, droughts, victories, transitions. These acts reinforced belief in cosmic balance. For communities, these rituals were terrifying and meaningful at the same time. Fear and faith intertwined. Victims were often prisoners or outsiders. This reduced internal threat, but did not remove fear. Everyone understood the logic. No one was fully safe. Violence also existed quietly. Domestic disputes, punishments, enforcement of authority. These moments left no monuments, but they shaped behavior. Social control relied on reputation. Shame mattered. Exclusion mattered. Open defiance carried consequences. Most people complied to avoid escalation. Weapons were simple but effective: stone blades, clubs, spears. They required proximity. Violence was intimate, not distant. This increased psychological weight. Those who witnessed violence remembered it vividly. Memory traveled faster than armies. Children learned fear early. They heard stories, they saw scars, they learned which paths were dangerous. Awareness became part of survival. Violence altered settlement patterns. Some villages moved closer to defensible areas, others clustered near centers of power. Safety reshaped geography. Night increased vulnerability. Darkness hid movement. Sounds carried. Fires were watched carefully. Guarding became routine in uncertain times. Trust narrowed. Strangers were approached cautiously. Travelers were watched. Exchange slowed during unrest. Yet life continued. Fields were replanted. Homes repaired. Rituals resumed. Violence did not erase routine. It interrupted it. This resilience came at a cost. People lived with readiness. Tools doubled as weapons. Paths were memorized for escape. Anxiety became background noise. Violence also reshaped belief. Defeat required explanation. Loss demanded meaning. Ritual intensified after conflict. Balance needed restoration. Not all violence was external. Power within communities could be harsh. Elites demanded labor and tribute. Refusal was dangerous. Compliance was survival. This created quiet resentment. But rebellion was rare. Risk outweighed reward. Most adapted. The forest offered no refuge. Hiding meant exposure to hunger, animals, disease. Safety was found in community, even under pressure. Violence reminded people of limits. No matter how carefully life was organized, it could be undone quickly. This awareness encouraged caution and restraint. People avoided unnecessary risk. They chose routine over ambition, stability over expansion, survival over glory. For most Maya, violence was not a story of heroism. It was disruption, something to endure, not celebrate. When conflict passed, communities focused on repair, rebuilding trust, restoring fields, rebalancing ritual. Memory remained. Stories of violence warned future generations. Knowledge passed quietly, shaping behavior long after scars faded. Violence lived at the edge of life, not central, but never absent. Its presence sharpened appreciation for ordinary days, days without fear, without loss, without disruption. Those days were precious, and people worked hard to preserve them.
Night in the Maya world was not a pause. It was a change in rules. When the sun disappeared behind the forest canopy, visibility dropped quickly. Heat softened, but uncertainty grew. The familiar landscape transformed into something less predictable. Darkness arrived fast. There was no long twilight. One moment, shadows stretched. The next, the forest closed in. Without artificial light beyond fire, the world narrowed to small illuminated spaces. Firelight became essential. Cooking ended, but flames stayed.
firelight protected against animals, insects, and fear. It marked the boundary between safety and the unseen. Families gathered closer, sleeping arrangements tightened, mats were placed near one another, children stayed close to adults. Distance felt dangerous at night. The forest grew louder. Insects dominated sound. Frogs, birds, unseen movement in leaves. Every noise carried meaning. Most were harmless, some were not. People learned to listen. Not every sound demanded response. Panic wasted energy. Calm preserved safety. Night required restraint. Animals moved freely. Predators hunted. Smaller animals searched for food. People avoided leaving shelter unless necessary. A simple trip outside carried risk. Night amplified belief. Darkness blurred boundaries between natural and supernatural. Spirits felt closer. Dreams carried weight. Bad dreams were remembered. Protection relied on ritual. Prayers were spoken softly. Amulets were checked. Fires were maintained. These actions did not guarantee safety, but they restored control. Sleep was light. People woke often. Sounds interrupted rest. Complete unconsciousness was rare. Awareness lingered. This vigilance was learned. Children adapted early. They learned not to wander, not to cry loudly, not to attract attention. Illness felt worse at night. Fever intensified. Pain grew louder in silence. Without distraction, discomfort dominated thought. Night also carried emotional weight. Memories surfaced. Worries expanded. The mind replayed fear. Daylight tasks kept thoughts grounded. Night released them. Despite this, night offered relief. Heat eased, work stopped. Bodies rested, even lightly. The pause mattered. Social rhythms slowed. Conversation quieted. Laughter softened. Storytelling happened, but without excitement. Calm helped prepare for morning. Guarding was subtle. Someone remained alert. Not formal watch, but awareness. Responsibility rotated naturally. Darkness reinforced dependence. Alone, survival was unlikely. Together, it was possible. Night reminded people of this truth. Travel at night was rare. Paths were invisible. Hazards multiplied. Only necessity justified movement. Night shaped schedules. People woke early because night limited activity. Days stretched longer. Productivity aligned with light. Fear was managed, not eliminated. People did not expect nights to be safe. They expected to endure them. This expectation reduced panic. The forest did not sleep. Its rhythms continued. People adapted around them. At dawn, relief arrived. Birds announced safety. Light restored clarity. The world reopened. Night passed, not peacefully, but successfully. This success mattered. Surviving night after night built confidence. Routine overcame fear. Night did not break the Maya world. It disciplined it. It taught caution, restraint, and cooperation. And when morning came, people returned to work, carrying the memory of darkness quietly with them.
The ancient Maya world did not endure because of kings. It endured because ordinary people continued. Behind temples, calendars, and carved stone stood lives shaped by routine. Lives that rarely appeared in monuments, yet carried the weight of the civilization itself. Most Maya were not rulers. They were farmers, parents, craftsmen, and children. People who woke before the sun, who worked the land, who repaired their homes, who cared for the sick, who prepared food with the same movements every day. Their strength was not dramatic. It was quiet. They endured heat, hunger, illness, fear, and uncertainty, without expecting reward. Survival was not heroic, it was necessary. What kept them going was not optimism, it was familiarity. They knew the rhythm of seasons. They knew how long pain lasted. They knew that rain might fail, but that the forest would eventually return. Knowledge of cycles replaced hope. Life was fragile. Homes could collapse. Crops could fail. Children could be lost. Bodies wore down early. Violence could appear without warning. Yet people rebuilt, again and again. They replanted fields. They repaired roofs. They relearned routines. The forest reclaimed abandoned places, but people adapted elsewhere. Endurance was learned early. Children watched adults respond to loss without stopping. They learned that grief did not end responsibility, that rest came briefly, that life continued whether one felt ready or not. This taught restraint. People did not rush. They did not waste. They respected routine, because routine preserved energy. The Maya did not expect comfort. They expected balance between labor and rest, between belief and action, between fear and discipline. Belief gave structure, not certainty, but coherence. Ritual did not prevent disaster, but it made it understandable. It allowed people to continue without losing meaning. Community mattered more than individuals. Survival depended on cooperation, sharing labor, sharing food, sharing vigilance at night. Alone, survival was unlikely. Together, it was possible. Even in hardship, there was beauty. Morning light through forest leaves, the sound of grinding maize at dawn, fireflies near sleeping homes, quiet voices before sleep. These moments did not erase difficulty, but they made it bearable. The Maya world did not end suddenly. It changed slowly. Some cities emptied, others adapted. People moved. The forest returned. Civilization did not collapse in a single moment. It faded through countless ordinary decisions: when to stay, when to leave, when to try again. What remains today is stone, but what truly mattered was flesh and habit, hands that worked, bodies that endured, families that adapted. Ordinary people carried this world for centuries, without knowing how long it would last. They did not build for eternity, they built for tomorrow. And tomorrow came, again and again, until it didn't. This is why their story still matters, not because it was grand, but because it was human, because it reminds us that most of history is lived quietly, that civilizations are sustained not by power, but by routine, not by certainty, but by endurance. As the Maya night deepened, fires burned low, families settled closer, the forest continued to breathe, and another day waited just beyond sleep. If this quiet journey through the past has brought you calm, you are always welcome to return. There are many worlds to explore, slowly, gently, and without hurry. For now, you can rest. Let the sounds fade. Let the day loosen its hold, and allow yourself to drift into sleep. Good night.